Both of your parents didn't even finish high school. Cut ties with such low-life parents immediately.
My husband, whom I had always thought of as kind and dependable, began to scorn and belittle me the moment he found out my parents were middle school dropouts. I was taken aback and saddened by his sudden change in behavior, which came as a complete shock. My name is Julie Sutherland, a 33-year-old working housewife. I live with my 1-year-older husband, Tom, and our 4-year-old child, leading a busy life. As for my job, I work at a company run by my parents. I respect my parents for building their own business, and since I was young, I've been interested in their work. I was delighted when I got a job after thoroughly learning. So when Tom suggested I become a full-time housewife after we got married, I insisted on continuing my work. At that time, Tom respected my wishes, which made me very happy. We had a love marriage, and initially, we supported each other without any issues. Even when we had differing opinions, we would resolve them amicably and respect each other's views. Until then, I felt happy to have married a good man. However, at one point, Tom found out my parents were middle school dropouts and started to deride them. My parents' company may be small, but Tom had admired it until he started complaining just because they didn't have high school diplomas.
What does it matter if they didn't finish high school? Why do you suddenly care about that?
No matter their educational background, my parents currently have the ability to run a company. Education is important, sure, but it shouldn't be the only measure of a person. Up until then, Tom had built a good relationship with my parents, so I pleaded with him not to judge them solely on their educational attainment. But Tom couldn't accept my perspective and seemed displeased with me for defending them.
Dropouts are no good, right? Don't associate with such parents.
He even went as far as telling me to cut off my relationship with them. Without reconsidering his grudge against people without a high school diploma, Tom became even more stubborn and our relationship worsened. Moreover, from this time on, he began to strongly insist that I quit my job. Especially after our child was born, he started saying it even more frequently.
Quit your job already and focus on the housework. But you used to say it was fine for me to continue working.
My husband, who had once respected my decision, had now become pushy with his selfish ideas. Since he wasn't like this before, I was confused and sad but kept trying to convince him, hoping he would understand. However, no matter how many times I explained my reasons for wanting to keep working and the benefits it brought to our family, he consistently told me to quit. He seemed to truly believe quitting was for my benefit, belittling my desire to work. As a result, our once peaceful life, where we used to help each other, turned into days filled with endless arguments. The quarrels continued, and Tom's insults about my job and my parents increased, chilling our marital relationship. My parents had expressed a wish to celebrate our child's birthdays and graduation ceremonies together if possible, but my husband vehemently refused with harsh words. Furthermore, he wouldn't listen to me and would unilaterally decide on plans, which led me to consider divorce. Then, one day, Tom came home in high spirits because his promotion was confirmed. With the salary increase, he told me to quit my job.
With my pay raise, you don't need to work, right? Just quit and take care of the home.
Since he started telling me to quit my job, Tom stopped doing any housework he used to help with. Probably he was hoping I'd quit if the housework suffered. But I continued with the housework as usual and stood my ground when he used it as an excuse for me to quit. Although he claimed he was telling me to quit to reduce my burden, he didn't move a muscle to help with housework and childcare. His attitude only made my love for him grow colder. Now, seeing I wouldn't change even with housework as a reason, he was using money as the new argument. Indeed, we could live comfortably on Tom's salary alone without me working. Even considering our children's future, we can afford to live comfortably, so I didn't need to work forcibly. But I want to work. Ever since I was a kid, I watched my parents work with such vitality, and I've lived wanting to try my hand at their jobs. Working at my parents' company has always been a dream of mine. And when I actually started working there, far from being satisfied, I found myself wanting to work there even more, feeling it as my calling in life. That's why I've been pushing so hard to balance housework and my job, so of course, I won't quit.
I've said it over and over, I love my job. So I'm not gonna quit, I told him firmly.
My husband just laughed at me as if I was a joke, opposing the idea.
A woman's place is taking care of the home, isn't it? Besides, a poor company like that will go under in no time.
He mocked with an outdated view, belittling my parents' company. True, my parents' company is small and the building is old. But that doesn't mean the work we do is laughable. My parents' business is community-oriented, well-regarded by the locals, and cherished by its employees. I take pride in my parents and the company they've built, and I absolutely don't want to cave into my husband's demands. Annoyed at my husband for demeaning my parents and their company, I reiterated that I wouldn't quit my job. Then he brought up our kids as a reason.
You're always at work, barely involved with the kids. You should become a stay-at-home mom and be there for them. He argued. I really don't want to hear that from you, I retorted.
After work and on weekends, I make sure to spend time with our children. In contrast, my husband prioritizes his hobbies at home and seldom pays attention to the kids. Come to think of it, if he doesn't do housework or participate in childcare, what's the point of him being around? I've noticed that the kids barely react to my husband, who doesn't pay much attention to them, creating a vicious cycle. Reflecting on it, he has never really acted the way a father should.
A man says in the back, you know,
he'd say with a smug smile when pointing out my supposed lack of involvement with the kids. A father who only pursues his hobbies and constantly complains when at home, is he really necessary? Thinking this over, I've become more aware of the possibility of divorce. And the next morning, despite his complaints for me to quit my job, I ignored him and went to work. Though irritated with his mindset and attitude, my focus is now on work. Arriving at the office, I was ready to switch gears and give my best at work when unexpectedly, the president asked to see me in the reception room. Puzzled, I went to find a stern-looking man seated across from my father. It was clear from my father's expression that he was extremely upset. As I wondered what the matter could be, my father asked me to listen first.
This concerns you too, Julie. I'm sorry, but could we go over it from the beginning?
At my father's behest, the man across from him started speaking. The man, named Mr. Smith, had been the assistant project leader on a joint project with my father's company. The original leader hardly visited the site and gave almost no direction, so essentially, Mr. Smith was leading. The project was about constructing and designing a new store in collaboration with my father's company. The new store's concept matched well with the reputation of my father's company's buildings, which had an old-fashioned, comforting feel. So, they approached my father's company, and everything was going smoothly without any issues. But just as they were about to start the construction work, the leader abruptly decided to go with another company, snatching away the plans. This project was a major deal, and a significant amount of money had already been involved, so my father was understandably angry. Mr. Smith tried to salvage the situation, but the leader had already sabotaged him. He had falsified Mr. Smith's work hours and performance, leading to a false accusation at his company. Because of this, Mr. Smith was removed from the project, putting it in jeopardy. Other team members protested, but to no avail. So, today's visit was to apologize for the project coming to a standstill. After hearing them out, I realized I wasn't involved in this project. So, I was left wondering why I had been called here when Mr. Smith, already looking quite pale, turned even more apologetic. My father also turned a pained, sorry look my way. It's a tough truth for you to hear, he began. The shocking news was that the no-good leader in question was my husband. Normally, one might get mad and deny it if told their spouse was up to such things, but given my husband's usual behavior, I was more inclined to believe it. Actually, I even thought it might be a good reason to go ahead with a divorce I was considering. And it turns out he was still causing trouble. Then, both men, looking quite distressed, shared another fact with me. The leader had placed a young woman in the now vacant assistant leader spot. The two of them were seen together so often that it sparked rumors within the company of an affair.
Are you saying they might be having an affair? But it's just a rumor, right?
Despite my disbelief that my husband could be cheating, I had to ask for clarification, to which Mr. Smith regretfully confirmed.
While we can't say for sure it's an affair, they often dine together and are seen alone a lot, so it's almost certain.
Apparently, many employees had witnessed my husband in private rooms with this young woman and out and about together. Their behavior suggests it's more than just being work associates. The two of them spoke hesitantly, considering my feelings. Especially, my father had a troubled expression. My father knew how happy I seemed before and at the beginning of my marriage. Back then, I was all about loving my husband, so it must have been tough for him to break this news. But now, I've already got a reason for divorce, and to be honest, I'm even somewhat relieved, so the news of my husband's affair doesn't hit me hard.
Don't worry about it. Things haven't been working out between us for a while, and I'm actually considering a divorce, I reassured them.
When I mentioned my upbeat attitude about the divorce, my father looked shocked. If the affair is really happening, then I'll definitely be going after a fair amount of alimony, I said with a smile, and Mr. Smith seemed to regain some of his spirits.
Actually, I'm thinking of reporting to the company what the leader of this project's team has been doing. If things go well, I believe we can continue with this plan.
These words seemed to give my father some energy back. The three of us then started brainstorming a plan to bring my husband down. Fueled by all the demeaning and complaining I've endured from him, and now his cheating, I was fired up to give him a taste of his own medicine, contributing plenty of ideas. And behind the scenes, while my husband went about his usual business, we were making preparations in secret. We planned to keep him in the dark until the last possible moment before confronting him all at once. At the company, Mr. Smith led the effort to gather evidence of my husband's tampered reports and to prove that the project he claimed as his own wasn't actually his work. We had all the prep work and research for the project proposal on hand, and since my husband hadn't attended the meetings, the meeting minutes proved it. We submitted all this evidence along with a letter of protest from the entire team, and the company decided to conduct a factual check before giving my husband a chance to explain. As for me, I hired a private investigator to look into the affair. While waiting for the results, I tried checking his personal belongings. When I looked up infidelity countermeasures on the internet, it seemed that people who were cheating were often found out because they had items that hinted at the existence of someone else. So I decided to take a look through his bag, coat pockets, and dresser drawers to see if I could find anything. Thinking the more evidence of the affair, the better, I searched carefully without his knowledge but found nothing that seemed like proof of infidelity. I had expected to find women's items or telling receipts, but there was nothing, not a trace of another woman. This made me half suspect that the affair was just the imagination of the witnesses. But later on, when I saw the investigation results, it was clear my husband was indeed guilty. There were photos of my husband with a younger woman looking intimate, arm in arm, and even entering and exiting a hotel together. With my mind already set on divorce, I thought this was almost convenient. I realized then that I had no lingering feelings for him. Since I no longer regretted the decision to divorce him, I started packing my things so I could leave the house at any time and was waiting for the right moment to tell him. Meanwhile, my husband, oblivious to everything, was in a good mood about a potential promotion, persistently telling me to quit my job and continuing to belittle my parents. I kept responding as usual until one day, he lost his temper in a way I'd never seen before.
You really won't listen to me. You always put your parents first. We're married, you should be prioritizing your husband, he shouted.
But it's his fault for belittling my parents and dumping all the housework and childcare on me without lifting a finger to help. How am I supposed to rely on someone who's too busy to help when I ask? I almost sighed out of frustration at my do-nothing husband who only complains. Plus, he never listens during discussions, just gets angry when things don't go his way. Quick to anger and quick to insult my folks. Who would stand by such a partner? He wasn't like this in the early days of our marriage. I feel sad thinking about how things used to be. Up until now, I tried not to be too harsh with him because we were living together, but with divorce on my mind, I didn't hold back.
Then maybe you should finally stop badmouthing my parents. And you just dump all the housework and childcare on me. What kind of husband are you?
And with that, I confronted him directly for the first time. Not liking my stance one bit, my husband turned even redder with anger.
Shut up. Listen here, don't ever bring your parents to any family functions again. We're married, I won't even allow you to contact them. If you don't like it, then it's divorce, he yelled.
My husband, disliking my defiant attitude, threatened me with divorce as if to intimidate me. He thought I would be afraid of divorcing him, which just made me feel dumbfounded. Despite him never really acting like a husband, I wondered how he could say such things with so much confidence. Though I was internally rolling my eyes, I kept a solemn face and asked him, "Are you okay with that?" When he mentioned divorce, I felt a surge of relief inside, thinking I could easily get one, but I kept a serious face as I sought confirmation. Perhaps thinking I was distressed by the idea, he looked a bit smug as he replied,
"Yeah, you'd be lost without me. I'm quite the catch, but who'd look twice at a stubborn and dull woman like you?"
He seemed to think that I would be unable to fend for myself after the divorce. And even went on to mock my age and personality, suggesting I wouldn't be able to remarry. Facing his gloating smile, I calmly showed him the completed divorce papers.
Understood. Then please sign the divorce papers. What? Are you serious? You'd be in trouble without me, right?
Shocked that I was considering divorce, he asked again, as if still trying to intimidate me. I retorted, loaded with all the frustration I'd accumulated.
Life is easier without you around. It's exhausting to be with someone who does nothing but complain.
It's better not to have someone who doesn't help out with the family and just struts around. Life would clearly be more enjoyable without him, so I'd prefer it if he were gone. His displeasure at my seemingly happy reaction to the divorce only made him angrier.
I'd be better off without you too.
In response to my words, he hastily signed the divorce form. The next early morning, I took the kids and the divorce papers, packed our bags, and left the house. I had already informed my parents the day before, so we immediately went to their place. They had been made aware of my intention to divorce, so everything was set up for us to live there, and we were able to move without any panic. That day, my husband not only lost the promotion he had been looking forward to but also his affluent lifestyle. Upon arriving at work, he was promptly called into the conference room, where he was confronted about the allegations Mr. Smith and the others had raised. In the conference room were the team members who had accused him and the young female employee rumored to have had an affair with him.
What's this all about, all of a sudden?
He asked, thinking it was a work-related discussion until he realized there was an auditor present, which rattled him. He was questioned about the project and his work behavior, and though confused, he tried to bluff.
What are you talking about? This plan is definitely my work. Stop with these baseless accusations.
But you can explain the details of this project plan, right? However, with the evidence Mr. Smith and I had compiled, he couldn't explain the project plan he had claimed as his own. It was no surprise since he hadn't created it nor had he reviewed the content thoroughly. When questioned about the project plan, he couldn't explain anything, whereas Mr. Smith could respond perfectly. Therefore, he couldn't prove that he hadn't stolen the credit and found no way out of his predicament. He was told that his promotion was off the table, and although he protested angrily, he was not taken seriously. Then, he was further grilled about the affair, and the confrontation with the young female employee ensued. She hadn't been briefed about the meeting and quickly slipped up.
He said he'd give me favorable treatment in my job if I went along with it. I knew he was married, so I thought it was just part of my job.
She claimed she had been reluctantly involved with him because he had forced her. Now, she began to play the victim, trying to shift all the blame onto my husband.
Don't spout nonsense. You're trying to make me the bad guy all by yourself.
My husband shouted back in anger, eventually lashing out with accusations about how she had been the one pursuing him. They both made wild claims against each other, which apparently turned into quite the argument. But thanks to the investigation results from the detective agency I had commissioned, neither could deny the affair. They were both deemed to have character issues that rendered them unreliable for their positions. My husband was demoted to a window-side position as a regular employee. And his salary was reduced to the point where he could barely afford to live on his own. His misconduct ensured that he would never be able to rise through the ranks at that company again. Someone who doesn't take their job seriously and just steals their subordinates' accomplishments shouldn't be able to get promoted. Moreover, my husband had been slacking off, never really putting in the effort at work to be considered excellent. He had a good front, and initially, some people seemed to be on his side, but once the evidence of his wrongdoing came to light, people quickly distanced themselves from him. This made his workplace environment uncomfortable, and with his past misdeeds, he found himself in a tough spot to find a new job, leaving him clinging to his window-side position. Furthermore, since I had hired a lawyer, I was able to demand alimony and child support from him. As we hadn't settled property distribution and other details yet, I hadn't filed the divorce papers at this point. And the alimony was set at $60,000. Additionally, child support was decided at $1,000 per month. The alimony was higher because of the verbal abuse I routinely received from my husband. Since deciding on divorce, I had recorded these instances, which contributed to the larger amount. As for the division of assets, there was no issue with the house since it was a rental, and it was decided not to split our savings. Since our marriage, my husband had been spending money on his hobbies and affairs with women, and my savings were more substantial, which is why I made this choice. When I contacted my ex-husband about the alimony and child support, he resisted paying such a large sum.
A kid needs their father. Let's get back together,
he suggested, probably thinking there was still hope since the divorce papers hadn't been filed yet. When he pressured me for reconciliation, which made me feel uncomfortable, I declined, and he ended up accusing me of being after his money. Facing his threatening tone, I calmly informed him that I was recording the conversation and that any further threats would just increase the alimony. After going that far, my ex-husband finally calmed down and agreed to pay, and he stopped contacting me afterward. Of course, I also demanded alimony from his mistress, and since she was younger, I heard that the alimony payment wiped out her savings. She had become an assistant leader but was demoted to a regular employee and had her pay cut. Rumors of her affair made it uncomfortable for her at the company, and it seems she resigned shortly after. Thanks to the hard work of Mr. Smith and his team, the company's transactions could proceed without any issues, bringing peace to both my marriage life and the company's operations. Despite trying not to care before, the condescending remarks from my ex-husband's parents and the belittling voices were indeed stressful, and I have felt a refreshing sense of liberation since the divorce. My husband seemed to think it's pitiful for a woman not to be able to remarry, but I don't feel that way. My children, too, haven't shown any sadness about their father's absence. Instead, they seem to laugh more at home than they used to. Observing my children's happiness, I'm confident that divorcing was the right call, and lighter in spirit, I dedicate myself to work and parenting today.